So I'm in quite a few different Facebook groups based around the Halloween franchise, and the one constant thing I'm always hearing is I don't understand the timeline. I don't understand how Laurie Strode is alive in H2O after they said she was dead in Halloween 4. Or I don't understand why Michael Myers is not in Halloween 3. Or how did we go from Resurrection to the Rob Zombie reboot? So I want to clarify the timeline for anyone who hasn't figured this part out yet. But before we do that, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the like button on this video. It helps so much more than you know. Now, jumping right in, of course, we start with Halloween from 1978, the original. This is where young Michael Myers stabs his older sister when he's just 6 years old. He gets put away into Smith's Grove Sanitarium and escapes when he's 21. He goes after a bunch of babysitters, eventually crossing paths with Laurie Strode. Laurie Strode would get the better of him multiple times throughout this battle, and of course, it would end with Dr. Loomis saving Laurie Strode by shooting him 6 times, and he would fall off of a balcony and then completely disappear. Now, this was supposed to be an anthology. This Michael Myers thing was only supposed to be for one film, but we'll get more into that when we get to Halloween 3. Now, they kind of put John Carpenter's back to the wall because he didn't want to make any more Michael Myers movies. It was supposed to stop right where it ended in part 1. However, he got kind of forced into it, so he had to come up with a reason for why Michael Myers was going after Laurie Strode. So what he came up with is that Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister. That gives him kind of the purpose, since he killed the older sister when he was a kid. He's going after all of his family members. So this will lead to more killings throughout the movie, of course culminating in Michael vs. Laurie at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, where Dr. Loomis would explode the surgical room with Michael Myers and himself still in it. Michael would walk out completely on fire and then collapse. Now, this was supposed to be the very end. Michael Myers burned alive. He is dead. No more to it. Now, John Carpenter wanted to have his own thing. He wanted Halloween to be an anthology. So every single Halloween film would be a completely different story, unrelated to the one that came before it. So just focusing on the Michael Myers timelines, we're going to go ahead and put Halloween 3 to the side. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say Halloween 3 is part of the universe and Michael Myers is in it. However, he is in a commercial on the TV that Dr. Chalice is watching, and there was a purpose for that. The entire reason was to let us, the audience, know that these two things did not exist in the same universe. So we're going to go ahead and set Halloween 3 to the side. So Halloween 4 picks up 10 years after the events of Halloween 1 and 2 that took place on the same night. Now, Jamie Lee Curtis did not want to come back and do any more Halloween films, so they had to find a way to continue this story. So what they came up with was that Laurie Strode died in a car accident. However, she did have a daughter named Jamie Lloyd. And since we've already established that Michael was going after all of his family members, this gave us a purpose for Michael to move on. So throughout the film in Halloween 4, Michael Myers is going after Jamie Lloyd. Dr. Loomis is there, of course, to help and try to stop this from happening. This leads us to Halloween 5. Same premise. He's still going after Jamie Lloyd. Nothing has really changed except for a small detail, and that is they introduced the cult of Thorn. So at the beginning of that movie, we see that Michael Myers has a mark on his wrist for the Thorn cult. They introduced the Man in Black. However, the writers and the director were not planning to come back for Halloween 6, so they did not really think this thing out. They just introduced these and left it to whoever was going to be making part 6 to figure out. So moving on to part 6, we get more of the Cult of Thorn. Jamie Lloyd is still alive, played by a completely different actress, of course. It is not Danielle Harris. But they give us the Thorn cult backstory. They give us what is driving Michael Myers. So without going into too much detail, because that's not what this video is about, we move on. So we move on to H2O, and this is where we get our real first break in the timeline. So Jamie Lee Curtis agrees to come back. She's trying to get John Carpenter on board, which never happens. And they decide that they are going to ignore everything that happened after part 2. So Halloween's 4, 5, and 6 never happened. So we only have Halloween's 1 and 2, which take place on the same night. And then we fast forward 20 years later to where Laurie Strode is back. However, now her name is Carrie Tate. She's in disguise as the head mistress of a private high school. And she is still traumatized by the events of those first 2 films. Now remember, Jamie Lloyd does not exist in this timeline whatsoever. Nothing from 4, 5, and 6 ever happened. However, she does have a son, John Tate. This was intended to be the official last film in the entire Halloween franchise. Jamie Lee Curtis said once again she would never come back. She wanted to kill off Michael Myers for good. However, Mustafa Akkad had other plans and he had a slight clause in the contract that said Michael Myers could never die. So they retconned the entire ending and we continue on to Halloween 8, which is Halloween Resurrection. So we're still in the Halloween's 1, 2, H2O, and Resurrection timeline. Laurie Strode dies in the first 10 minutes of this film, giving us an entirely new cast, new story, and I guess they intended to go further beyond that point. If you've read Taking Shape 2, then you'll see there were other movies planned after Resurrection. However, those never happened. So now we get another deviation in the timeline. Now we get Rob Zombie's remakes. So Rob Zombie was supposed to come back and do Halloween 9 after Resurrection. However, he decided to go ahead and go a different route with it and just go ahead and reboot the entire franchise from scratch. Rob Zombie's Halloween is a remake of Halloween 1 from 1978. In 2009, he would make a sequel to his version of Halloween 1. There was supposed to be a Halloween 3D also by Rob Zombie, but that would never happen. So then we get our very next break in the timeline, and this is the David Gordon Green timeline. So once again, we are ignoring all of the sequels in the franchise, but this time we're also ignoring Part 2. Part 2 never happened. Only Halloween's 1978 matters in David Gordon Green's timeline. So that means we're also erasing the story that Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister. If Halloween 2 never happened, then Laurie Strode is not his sister, because that's when we found out that she was. So now here we are 40 years later in 2018, and Laurie Strode is still traumatized by the events of that very first night in 1978, excluding Part 2, of course. And this would lead us into Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. So I know most Halloween fans know this already, but I see this a lot in a lot of the Facebook groups and Instagram posts, and there's still so much confusion out there. So hopefully this helped to clear things up a little bit. Before I go, please remember to hit that subscribe button and hit the like button on this video. It helps so much more than you know.